Now, voters across eastern Ukraine have made their decisions and chosen their leaders. The self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been striving for greater autonomy, refusing to recognise the current Kiev authorities. For months, the area has been enduring the army's crackdown on anti-government forces. But despite sporadic fire, hundreds of thousands still turned out to cast their ballot. Well, in the Lugansk People's Republic, its incumbent Prime Minister, who won the election with 63%, former military commander Igor Plotnitsky, had served locally as the defence minister there before being appointed as head of the region's government. In the Donetsk People's Republic, the incumbent leader there, Alexander Zaharchenko, also stays after getting 75% of the vote. He also served as the military commander of the regional capital. Then in August, he was appointed prime minister there. There's been harsh reaction, though, from Kiev. For more on that, let's go now to RT's Paula Slier. Paula, what has the president been saying?
Well, Kiev has said that it will never recognize these elections. The Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is now considering cancelling the law on self-determination that he gave to the eastern regions just a little over a month ago. He says that these elections were in breach of the Minsk agreement that was reached in September. And he says, according to that agreement, these elections were supposed to be held under Ukrainian law. However, he does say that he is prepared to reach a new agreement on self-government with the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, but only if they cancel these elections. He says that that new agreement will include details on a new budget and also redrawing the borders of these regions. Lugansk and Donetsk have issued a joint statement in which they have responded to these comments. They say that they are fully committed to the Minsk Accord and that they are ready for dialogue only if Kiev acts sensibly. At the same time, they also say that Kiev did agree to their conditions prior to the Minsk agreement and that these conditions are what they're acting in accordance with. Now, the elections did see a huge turnout here in the eastern regions. People queued for hours. The voting has now been completed. The election was hailed by international observers as reaching international standards and being of a high and transparent standard.
OK, thanks, Paula. That's RT's Paula Slier live there from Donetsk in the east of Ukraine. Well, for more reaction to Kiev's statements there and the elections in the east of Ukraine, let's talk to Derek Munro from the Foreign Policy in Focus think tank. He joins us now. Thanks very much for coming onto the programme. Look, is the situation retrievable? Because the two sides here, Kiev and the republics in the east of Ukraine, appear to be growing further apart, not closer together.
Well, I think political situation is developing itself in a way where everybody try to basically save the face. Poroshenko government is basically calling the Ukrainian law as the most predominant factor while determining the future of the eastern part of Ukraine, notwithstanding their own credibility have taken a great hit when the revolution took place and established the elected and basically deposed regularly elected president that was replaced before. So it's a matter of simply interpretation of what the laws say and how things are going to be going forward. Yes, there's definitely a danger of impasse in a situation where we can actually go to the status quo before the Minsk agreement. But as you can also, as your reporter stated earlier, the elections have taken very much their own very popular course, with the overwhelmingly majority population voting in the east, while the elections in Kiev were only frequented by about 20% of population.
Sure. Derek, that's all very well, but people might ask the question, was it wise to go ahead with these elections in the east of Ukraine now, given that the Minsk peace agreement was only signed, weeks ago? Have they really given peace a chance? They must have known this would have inflamed the authorities in Kiev.
Well, I think there are a lot of different things going on in the background. First of all, I think Poroshenko also has to kind of look at his own political situation, specifically with the different machinations and mechanism being put in place to establish his own government, specifically with a lot of different influences from the private sector and other different parties which are making up his coalition government. So surely this can be a posturing, but I think I will be a little bit more optimistic on this side, because I think the country has to get to the degree of creating some kind of degree of peace and stability in the region, because winter is coming. People have taken a very hard hit in standard of living, as well as the stability of the area itself. So going back to the status quo before the Minsk agreement, with presumption of taking again a war path, would not be productive towards anything. Would basically bring the country further into the catastrophe.
Okay.
So I believe that.
Sure. Well, let's just talk about a positive point there, Derek, because you mentioned that winter is coming. At least the two sides do appear to have agreed on something economically, and that's the buying of coal from the east of Ukraine to be sold to other parts of Ukraine, obviously with the winter in mind. I mean, how much of a good sign is that? Is that a good building block, a good foundation for peace?
I think it is, because ultimately the both sides have to kind of realize they really cannot, at least at this point, live without each other, and they all counterdependent economically, not to mention politically. So I think right now there is definitely a lot of posturing to the degree of breaking up relations and going back to the war path, because there are a lot of different dynamics that are taking place behind closed doors, because everybody simply at the end of the day wants to save face and wants to pretend to be in charge. But I think both sides have to be really well represented. And I think the major flaws in the Kiev election, which just took place just recently, was that the Eastern was simply not represented, and people were not allowed to vote because of the current political makeup in Kiev. So I think this is something that I think it's growing organically. What is going to transfer as a quote-unquote competitive source of power towards the Kiev government, it's really hard to tell at this point. But I think I hope that things will basically get back to normal.
OK, all right, on that point we do have to leave it. That's Derek Munro from the Foreign Policy in Focus think tank. Thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.